Okay, nice to see you, Milan. Again, very, very good. Welcome. Thank you for everyone attending this session. This is the second in the series of webinars that we have put on. The first webinar was about ISO 9001 and the Golden Triangle. This webinar today is on mastering ISO 45001 28 in compliance. The team that we'll be talking about today is effectively managing occupational health and safety indicators. We will be looking at how can an organization establish, implement, and maintain performance indicators that effectively informs us what we are doing well, what we need to do so we can better improve performance of the OH&S management system. Specifically, we're going to focus on what we should measure. Traditionally, some organizations measure what's easy to measure, not necessarily what should be measured. We're going to look at this then in terms of how do we effectively monitor those indicators. We're going to talk about how we're going to analyze if the management system is effective and efficient for us. And we're going to then focus on how measurement, monitoring, analysis-driven improvement delivers alignment with the organizations and the OHS business goals. Just for everyone's benefit, we're recording this webinar so that people can have access to it post-delivery. In terms of introductions, for anyone who doesn't know me, I am Gerard Kelly. I'm the CEO. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session. Today, I'm in our Limerick HQ office. You can see on the screen there the locations that we service. Willie will now introduce himself.
Hi guys, and you're very welcome. Thank you for taking this time out of your busy day. My name's Willie Walsh, and I'm coming to you from a place that's a little bit north of where Gerard is. So I'm based in Westport in County Mayo. So I'm really looking forward to being with you for the next hour. We would ask if you could to enter any questions or any comments that you might have into the chat, and we look at how we might just collate and respond to those at the very end of our time together. So myself, I'm not indeed the principal of the Kelmac Group, but I've been involved in this business since the early 90s. My first contact with it was in 1988. On my first evening offshore in the North Sea. It just so happened that first evening coincided with the evening that Piper Alpha went up. So, my first professional engagement in this particular area was quite not great. I wasn't near Piper, obviously, but it was an auspicious, or perhaps the opposite of auspicious, of an evening. So I'm passionate about it, and I'm really interested in dealing with this particular area that we're going to be looking at this afternoon, because perhaps I might introduce myself by saying that I've been interested in management systems from the Piper Alpha days right through to the work in Trinity College with NIFAST, and then subsequently as a consultant with different size companies over the years. I've always been interested in systems. I particularly in the last 5 years become passionate about 45001. Now, perhaps this is not something that we would talk about outside of this forum. Indeed, with the season of goodwill that's coming up, if I meet you in a social setting, I'll deny this passion, because it's a bit of a buzzkill for most people, but it's really, really important. 45001 is particularly interesting because it has this section dealing with monitoring, measuring, and analysis. Essentially, what's built into 45001 is the idea that what gets measured gets managed. And because our focus is on the key stakeholders, that is employees, this is what drives a really, really important aspect of what we're looking at here today. Specifically then, what we're going to cover over the next hour will be where 45001 looks for OHS measurement, monitoring and evaluation. We're going to look at what we know about near misses, serious injuries and fatalities. We're going to look at what we know about them. We're going to look at how broad stakeholder occupational health and safety and well-being is considered. Okay, we're looking at what the leading indicator concept means and how to identify and select powerful leading indicators for your particular business. Okay, that's what we're going to look at over the next hour. So looking forward to that time with you. Now, let's just go into what 45001 looks for a start. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this particular clause because it is the anchor for what we're looking at today, and indeed a lot of the work that we do when it comes to making 45001 work for the business and for the people who work in it. So 9000 and 45001 in 9.1.1 says really simply that the purpose of this performance evaluation section is to look to establish, implement and maintain a process for monitoring, measuring, analysis and performance evaluation. So that's really, really basic. It says we are going to have a process. So we're going to have a way of looking at monitoring, measuring, and analysis. So what that means is that we would determine, needs to be monitored, the legal requirements, the activities and hazard identification, risk and opportunities. We're going to be determining how the organization's health and safety objectives are set out, how we have effective operational and other controls. So it's essentially saying that, as a starting point, we're going to log exactly what needs to be done, how often, by whom, and where in the business this is important. It also asks us to look at, this using performance evaluation to see how effectively the OHS management system is working. There is, of course, a focus on calibration and monitoring equipment. That's essential. And it'll talk about the retention of the appropriate documented information. So that's 9.1.1, the kind of the heart of what this evaluation stuff, this measurement, monitoring and evaluation component is. So it's saying, listen, we got to have a plan. We've got to be clear about what we're doing. We've got to be clear about what we're monitoring, what we're measuring, and what we're evaluating. So that's the starting point. What gets measured is going to be the thing that gets managed. One of the things that we're going to see is that traditionally, we in the health and safety, occupational health and safety business have focused more on safety than on health, and have focused more on failure than on success when it comes to measurement, monitoring, and evaluation. But more about that just in a few minutes. Okay, so we set our tagline. We're going to anchor ourselves in trying to figure out what we should measure, how both staff health and safety is monitored, how to analyze if the system is working effectively, and how that links, that continuous improvement is driven by MMA. So that's that's really what we're looking at when we're looking at 45001 under clause 9. So I've ringed here at 9.1 because that gives us an idea of where that particular clause is in the whole program. Okay, now what's interesting about that is that is in the plan to check part of the whole sequence, and essentially it's looking back before it looks forward to continual improvement. So it's looking back at all of the other clauses and how they're operating in order for us to deliver on continual improvement. So at the very least, we're using this performance indicator, starting with figuring out, exactly what our strategic focus in business is. That's in 4.1. We're looking at the hazard profile that we're exposed to and the risks and opportunities associated with it at 6.1. We're bundling that up into what the main OHS objectives are for the business. And then we're driving all that towards 10.3, continual improvement. So, that's the shape of what this particular orientation in this. Of course, measuring analysis, all of that, but also look at lots of other clauses, role and responsibility, staff engagement, communication, all of the operation elements. But what's different here in our focus is that if you look at 10.2, we've ringed it in orange. You know, the monitoring, the performance monitoring, performance measurement and evaluation is forward looking. Okay, it's not backward looking. It's not backward looking in the way we're focusing on the components of 10.2, where it's looking back at the things that have gone wrong, where we've been unlucky, where things haven't worked out, and where there's corrective. We're looking at the way the system works so that we can drive continual improvement before there's a problem. That's this particular component that we're looking at today as well. So before we go any further, I'd like to look at a definition of leading indicators that I found to be quite useful and interesting from the Campbell Institute, the National Safety Council. So they define leading indicators as proactive, predictive, and preventative measurement. Okay, proactive, predictive, and preventative measurement. But here's the second bit that's really important for us: providing clues to potential future events. This means that we're involved in monitoring, measuring, analysis, and the evaluation of performance. We're doing it in order to point us towards what else we need to do to work better. Okay, it's providing clues to, not definitive answers, but clues to potential future events. I like this definition because it says, okay, when we provide the data that comes out of performance evaluation, it's provided for a reason. The reason isn't just to satisfy one small but important stakeholder group, for example, maybe the employees or the people at the top of the organization, the governance function. It's not that, it's to provide clues to potential future events for managers who are involved in seriously managing OH in the workplace. Second thing that is about providing information that's proactive, predictive, and preventative about the effectiveness of and the functioning of our management system. Okay, that's all anchored, of course, in this idea of predicting positive worker health outcomes and the operation of the safety, health, and welfare program. So that's where 45001 is looking for OHS measurement. It's looking for it not just when it comes to safety. We're looking at it not just from the point of view of providing a single figure that's about the current status. It's about providing proactive, predictive, preventive measurement information and data that gives us clues to potential future events and what we might do in order to make sure this works. So here, just a little thing that we might just say to start is, maybe the first thing that we do then, if we're trying to use this particular clause effectively, is, well, let's just review your organization's fulfillment of it. Okay, here's an example. Worked with a chemical substance import, minimal processing, that's decanting essentially from larger vessels into smaller vessels, logistics and supply business. So they reviewed this particular section and try to figure out, well, from what we should be doing, in particular from the legal point of view, what could we be doing better? So it was a small scale employer, major importer and distributor of a wide range of chemical substances and products. They were anchored by a strong logistics and distribution component, okay? And they decided to review 9.1.1, in particular in the context of the process and product monitoring requirements. So they did that and they found that there was gaps in SDS management and the delivery of the schedule and log around monitoring and measuring, okay? Alongside this, there was an introduction of a new managed document control system. The leading indicator that they decided to introduce in order to make this work better, okay, was to look at customer safety data documentation at point of entry to make sure that it was correct. They built on top of that. The target, by the way, the threshold was 100%. They wanted everything checked. In order to support that, during year one, 20% of those point of entry documentation verification records were checked by supervisors. That was the indicator that they were using to manage that particular part of the process, that essential part of the process more effectively. Here's another one. We had a contractor, construction contractor management working for a very significant client, over 15 contractors on site, employing about 1,000 plus construction tradespeople at the height of the project. They had put a significant investment in safety specialist presence by the client's project contractor manager on the ground, looking at what the contractors were doing. They found that a lot of the continuous improvement opportunities and potential safety failure events that were identified on a weekly basis, they didn't know what was happening after that. So they decided in order to improve their organization's functioning, to look at, to monitor the continuous improvement and inspection observation action points. They had a graduated KPI target of 100%. So they were saying, okay, as well as making these action point observations, they were going to say how quickly they needed to be controlled and to be closed off. So the leading indicator they were using was the 100% compliance with, those that were defined as 1 week closures, 1 month closure, and 3 month closures. Okay. So by doing that, they were able to see that the auditing and inspection activities were effective in their management system, but also were able to show that the level of risk that is ongoing and dynamic in that particular construction environment was progressively being managed. Now, monitoring, measurement, and analysis is not easily found when it comes to the 45,001, when it comes to OHS. Traditionally, because we have focused on pretty broad outcome-oriented type of measures. So we have poor old Homer here. He is working in a people-first business, and he's writing down how many accident-free days. We can see that he's up on a little bit of a step ladder, and it's pure luck as to whether he's actually going to fall or not. And it's a funny little illustration, but it kind of really points to where our traditional focus has been. So traditional safety measurement orientations look just at those larger outcome ideas. And those larger outcome ideas tend to tell us either how unlucky the few people that are recorded in these accident data are, or how unlucky they are, or how lucky we are as a business in getting away with having a very low measures. So it's not a fabulous way of approaching monitoring, measuring, and evaluation, and not great at giving us hints at or clues about what we should be doing in order to do better. Second thing is that, yes, the focus has very much been on just those safety components. So, the more welfare and health-oriented type of components in the measurement of same, tended to be focused on maybe a smaller group of people, considered perhaps just to be around the staff level, maybe just very, very kind of limited to a particular time of the year. So what I'm trying to say is that, we can, if we do effective monitoring, measuring, analysis, if we focus on the whole staff complement and the whole year, we have a chance of doing something other than just having the token introduction of the yoga in the boardroom or whatever. So third thing is that MMA is not easily found because we traditionally have not been good at strategically aligning what measurements we're looking for along with or coming from where the business is. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of examples of where we link this weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we're exposed to into the type of monitoring, measuring, and evaluation opportunities that we have to drive business forward. Okay, I'm not going to focus that much on the real impact of occupational health and safety failure, because I suppose there's the studies associated with that are usually associated with very much larger collections of company rather than small collections, One particular figure that I came across just in the research for this webinar was a figure that was gathered by the National Safety Council through the Campbell Institute, which looked at a lot of large corporations in the US. They figured that by not focusing on staff and family occupational health, there was an impact of approximately $1,685 per employee. Maybe not very much if you're talking about a smaller business, but when you're looking at the kind of scale of businesses that particular study was looking at, all of those 1,685 productivity deficits, they have an impact. So what do we know about accidents and near misses? Okay, so I might ask you this question, really focusing on one particular item. We all know about Heinrich and his 300 accidents with no injuries, the 29 accidents with minor injuries, and the one major injury. This is, a teaching tool that we've used for a long time. But do near misses predict serious injuries and fatalities? Do near misses predict serious injuries and fatalities? Just give you a couple of seconds to go into chat and tell us if you agree or you disagree with that. Near misses predict serious injuries and fatalities. If you agree, press agree. If you don't agree, press disagree. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to get Giovanna to go and have a look at that and to analyze what you've come back to us with. But what I hope you come back with is that no, near misses do not predict serious injuries and fatalities. What we found in the research over the last number of years, the last 3-4 years in particular, is that while there's a correlation between major injury and accidents and near misses that are not major injury events, there's a correlation, but there's not necessarily a direct causation, right? Near misses tend to happen as a result in particular of workplace conditions and the presence of a large number of low risk hazards, whereas serious injuries and failures tend to come as a result of health, well-being behavior, unintegrated management systems, and unexpected change. So I suppose what the data is telling us, what the research is telling us from the last while, is that when we look at what really happens to drive the major injuries in the workplace, the stuff that takes up most time when it comes to responding to safety failures, those serious injuries and fatalities come because we're rushing, we're fatigued, we are overly complacent, we are in a place psychologically where we're not clued into eyes on task, we're not clued into mind on task, and these error states are the things that deliver the serious problems. This is also telling us that in order to really get a handle on prevention and management, we should be measuring the high risk before we're measuring the low risk. Now, this is ABC starting point stuff that we should be dealing with, but this is what the data is telling us. And I think oftentimes when we look at our traditional safety measurement orientations, under 9.1, for example, we're not clear enough about the rationale for our focus on engineering services business that we worked over the last while, 300 plus staff working independently in small teams on client sites. 20% of those work tasks is external, on roofs, or using height access equipment. 10% of those work tasks uses equipment that's subject to formal certification inspection. So clearly, high risk work that to be oriented or that to be involved in is associated with that type of stuff. The other 80% is less high risk. This is the stuff where people, if there is an injury, if there is a mishap, if I'm rushing, if I'm frustrated, if I am, if I'm being complacent, but this is where the serious things happen. So the leading indicators that they decided to introduce to ensure that we were managing those particular hazards was they had a documented electronic permit system that was completed prior to task. They were able to measure that because they were able to collate the electronic start of the job with the electronic completion of the permit completion program. Again, they introduced a supervisor cross-check of task harness and equipment check that was also done. So this was their way of focusing on the particular exposures that their business was associated with. So here we begin to see that there's different strategies that we're going to use for choosing the type of measurement, monitoring, and analysis stuff that we're looking at. Okay, let's look at the health and well-being side of things. Okay, it's pretty clear for a lot of people in the way that it's being talked about, especially if we've got an engineering orientation to how we're doing safety at work, that a lot of health and well-being measures are usually considered to be subjective. Again, could I ask you, if you agree with that, go to your chat and say agree. If you don't agree, go to chat and say don't agree. Okay, agree, don't agree. Put those into our chat. We'll get Giovanna to analyze them and come back to us on them. Just going to give you a few seconds to do that if I could. Thank you very much. That should be everybody more or less. So I hope that you ended up disagreeing with that. Okay, I'm saying that because maybe in the past, okay, health and well-being was considered to be something that just existed in your head. Okay, but if we look at some parallel management systems that we should be working with, the HR or people and culture strategic threats, for example, they are clear in their focus these days around where the major threats are to the most important resource that we have to work with in the workplace. That is the people. IOSH, National Safety Council, ISO 45003 are all giving us really good guidance these days on the types of things that we should be monitoring, measuring, working with, okay, in the health and well-being side of things. It's an area that I think over the next while also we'll start to see if we have 45001 certification. We're told that we're going to have a lot more focus by your external auditors, not just on the safety elements, but also on those health and well-being elements. This is coming down the line for all of us who are in business, so keep an eye on that. And of course, yes, health and well-being measures are considered to be in our head until something happens. Okay, one of the things that we find is that when it comes to the longer term impacts of health and well-being failures that people might experience in the workplace, people tend to be off work for longer. It tends to have a bigger impact on the team, and the longer people stay out, the more difficult it is for people to get back into the same place that they worked in before. In this country, in Ireland in particular, this is problematic, in particular where there may be a claim ensuing or something that is some outside pressure on the person to stay away from work. Okay. What we found when we look at, for example, the disability sector is that the sooner people get back to work, even doing minimal duties, the quicker they're going to get better, but also the more likely they're going to re-engage productively with the workplace and perhaps end up not in that space where they're waiting for years in order to get claims. So what I'd suggest when it comes to health and well-being measures and in particular in this area is look at your demographics. Look in the literature at your IOSH stuff that's around health, psychological and otherwise, the National Safety Council, the Campbell Institute, and look at 45003 from earlier on this year. It's got loads of good suggestions on how we would monitor, how we would measure, and how we would evaluate health and well-being components in the workplace. That's in the literature. But let's look at demographics as well. Earlier on this year, I worked with a pharmaceutical manufacturing business, 450 staff, single rural location. 90% were working on 3 shifts, transitioning across most functions. Well-established workforce, 70% were over 50. 90% availed of a subsidized health insurance scheme. Recently, they introduced a targeted health promotion program focusing on winter absenteeism rates. In order to work on that, they decided to check what the uptake on subsidized winter family, not just staff member, but winter family flu vaccination measures were. Now, they didn't obviously decide to go and say everybody has to get vaccinations, because you can't do that with people. But they wanted to monitor what the uptake was and present that information back to people. That presenting of the information back to the staff was an encouragement for people to engage with the program. More important though, when they looked at the data that came from this, the absenteeism rates over the last 3 years has significantly reduced when it comes to winter flu, winter flu and, well, previously COVID, but winter flu vaccination in particular, because that tends to deliver a lot of time off for individuals. People come back slowly from that. Okay, so interesting focus on the demographics and what helps. It's also necessary to look at just the different categories for health and well-being. Again, the National Safety Council came up with 5 different areas that we should be looking at. What I might suggest just for ourselves is that, well, look at those areas: competence, reach, participation, satisfaction, and organizational health, but the first 3 in particular, and list the potential indicators that might be relevant to your business and the operation of your occupational health and safety management system. Again, let's look at this leading indicator concept again. Leading indicators: proactive, preventative, predictive measures, right? Providing clues to potential future events and what we can do in the management system to make sure we have positive worker health outcomes and the operation of a good health and safety program. Okay, leading indicators go back to really what senior management are interested in. Again, I'm going to ask you to do this really quickly. Senior managers are only interested in the bottom line. Go to your chat. Tell us if you agree with that. Senior managers are only interested in the bottom line, or if you disagree with it. Just going to give you a couple of seconds on that. Go to chat. If you agree, say agree in the chat. If you disagree, put disagree in the chat. Again, Giovanna is going to come back and give us some of the data associated with it, so we feedback afterwards. So here's the thing about strategic management, only interested in the bottom line. Well, yeah, that's what their business is, the bottom line. Our problem when it comes to occupational health and safety measurement is that we tend to say that it's either good news or bad news. Okay, and the bad news is, you know, we have lost time. The bad news, there's been accidents or incidents. We then to fool ourselves and say, well, if we don't lose time and we don't have accidents, that's good news. It's not good news, it's no news. Senior management are only interested in the bottom line, but they're also interested in good news. And one of the things that we can do with really effective leading indicator usage is to present good news. Not single metrics, but a number of metrics that present a clear picture about where the management system is working and how it's working in relation to the stuff that's driving the business, the strategic direction of it. So sometimes when we're just starting in this, we think, well, where are we going to get all of this data? And I say, well, hold on a minute. There's lots of data in the business already that we can use. There's productivity, there's lean, there's HR, people and culture stuff. So, you know, when we're looking at this stuff, look at the existing data-rich sources that you already have in the business, okay? Light engineering, assembly and manufacturing business that we worked in recently, okay? Part of a transnational group of light engineering business, all operating relatively independently, okay? They introduced in the Irish plant a lean manufacturing process over the last 3 years. It's delivering fabulous results. Fabulous results that are costed and that are time focused, okay? So these lean projects are yielding significant, here's the key thing, enumerated process and project cost savings. This started off being a 5S lean program. Over the last 3 years, it's developed into a 6S, where safety has been specifically taken out and demarcated what those savings were as well. So we were able to use the existing data sources that are there in the lean projects, okay, to review for each of the projects they had, not just the process and project cost savings, but the risk reduction and related potential cost savings. So for every project that this particular business is doing, the target was that everyone would demarcate specifically risk reduction and the related cost savings associated, potential cost savings associated with that, as well as the established process and project cost savings associated with the lean manufacturing process. So look to your existing data sources. Management are interested in going up thinking, okay? So they're looking at using what gets measured, the monitoring, measuring, and analysis component, to look back on the way we're operating, to see where from our clear risk and opportunity organizational context, the needs and expectations of the most important resource that a business has to deliver effective operations through hazard ID, OHS objectives, right through to continual improvement. That's the joined up thinking that this particular component can help us deliver. Clear risk opportunity context, right through to continual improvement, okay? So the action, I suppose, for us when it comes to thinking about how to select effective and powerful leading indicators is to work forward from strategy, right through stakeholder and risk, to deliver continual improvement. That's the kind of good that we want to be able to deliver for our governance function. Want to deliver for senior management. Here's an example from here in the west of Ireland. So working forward from strategy and stakeholder to risk, opportunity, and objectives, and through to continual improvement. So National Hotel Group, okay, 1,500 staff across the country. They have seen, as we all have seen, threat of labor shortage, increased staff over, competency and capacity deficits across the group. They looked at what was happening in the environment, this increased inward migration from non-English speaking European nationals in particular. They targeted that particular group in their campaign. The leading indicator they used to respond to this strategic SWOT review was to make sure that all of their competency teams were recruited to deliver in target non-English speaking populations. So all of their competency development in-house was flipped so that it could work in Ukrainian, it could work in Polish, it could work in all of those languages where there was a good new staff complement coming in who were happy to work, were delighted to work in this country. They looked at what was happening in the environment. They looked at those opportunities, those threats and those opportunities and said, okay, how can we deal with that? And what KPI do we need to have in our safety management system to make this work? 100% multilingual competency development teams, every single site that they were working in. So just to review maybe generally what we've been looking at, we're saying the action that we might want to take in order to improve our capacity to introduce really good monitoring, measurement, and analysis. What gets measured, gets managed. First, review our organization's fulfillment of that clause. Just go into it in detail. Look at what's in 9.1.1 in particular. Go to 9.2 on audit, 9.3 on management review as well, but 9.1.1 in particular, and be clear about what we definitely have to be measuring, who's going to be measuring, what the thresholds are, how often that measurement needs to happen, how we're going to record it, and how we're going to use it going forward to give us a clue about what we want to do to prevent stuff from happening in the future. Secondly, start with high risk hazards. measure our performance in relation to them, measure our performance in relation to the existing controls, measure our performance in relation to the effectiveness of our controls in actually delivering risk prevention. Okay. Look at our demographics that we're operating in. Every single business has a different demographic profile. Look at it and see where are their occupational health and safety, but in particular occupational health and well-being threats that we might just need to be looking at, and where are the opportunities maybe to go. Use the literature that is coming out these days, whether it's NSC, National Safety Council, the Campbell Institute, whether it's IOSH, whether it's ISO. There's lots more available to tell us where we should be looking and the types of measures we might be using in order to deliver on effective occupational health and well-being targets. Okay, look at our demographics and the literature. List the potential indicators relevant to your OHSMS just as an exercise. Go to those 5 headings from the National Safety Council. Say, well, listen, where could we be measuring around engagement? Where could we be measuring about competency? Where could we be measuring around the involvement of people in the safety business? Look to existing data rich sources. Don't try and invent the wheel. There's plenty of data being generated in really and presented in really interesting ways already in the business. Build on that. Work forward from strategy and stakeholder to risk opportunity, right through to continual improvement. Management like joined up thinking. And come here, don't forget data visualization. The way we can present data these days is much more engaging than it would have been previously. Okay, that lost time injury piece of information tends to be a little bit finite, a little bit closed in the clues that it's going to give us to look at other things that are important to drive OH and S in the workplace. So look at data visualization. That should say, by the way, and don't forget data visualization. My apologies there on that little blip, that typo in our deck here. Okay, just some other examples of leading indicators from practice that I've come across and that my colleagues have come across over the last while. Just some of the things. Environmental monitoring schedules, SOP conformance, really important stuff, competency development hours, health checks. All of these things are good in order to help us try and measure how we're doing. The trick is to pick what works for your business, the thing that works for your people, and the thing that's going to help us make our management system resources deliver good results, in particular for our senior management and the people who are working on the ground. Okay, that's about all that I have to say just at this stage. I appreciate your time. I look forward to hearing any questions you might have. I'm going to pass this back to Jared at this stage and just look for his comments. Jared.
Thanks, Willie. There was an early question from one delegate. What do you mean by entry point? At the early beginning of your presentation, there was a query, you talked about entry points. Could you clarify what you meant by that from an occupational health and safety perspective?
Okay, so if I'm going to work with a business, I'm working with that business, from when I'm recruited. So even in the recruitment process, there's an opportunity to gather information and data about how I'm going to be functioning as we go on. At the entry point, there's medicals, there's information that we'll be getting around on my capacity to work on weekends, how flexible it's going to be for working with them, if I have to accommodate family and otherwise. These days, these things we have to take into account right from the entry point of our staff when they're coming in to work with us as a business. That also has to be, that feeds into not just recruitment, but occupational health and safety in particular.
Okay. Yeah, good. There was a second query then around ISO 61882. Now, this is specifically a hazard technique for hazard identification, HACCP. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how does what's the relevance in your view in terms of HAZOP as a technique for high
Okay.
risk hazards? That was really the question. Yeah.
So HAZOP is, it's a particular study methodology that we use to interrogate particular problems that our business comes up against. Oftentimes, HAZOP is used in the aftermath of a significant failure or a significant problem that's been identified, maybe around health, maybe around well-being, but oftentimes associated with maybe a technical failure that has resulted in either damage, loss, or significant injury. Uh, it's time consuming. It's really effective in interrogating every aspect of the system. My own experience of it, though, is that it tends to be quite narrow in its focus on process and technology. And really, a good facilitator is needed to broaden the understanding of of really the value that HAZOP can bring to a problem that we're looking at.
Okay. There was a third question then that came up that was around, is management only interested in the bottom line? Uh,
Mhm.
there was a little bit of a disagreement there, not too much, but there was a
Yeah.
little bit of a disagreement there. Would you like to comment on that further?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm the CEO of a business, I've got to deliver for my shareholders or for my owners. Okay, so that's really important for us to acknowledge that money is important, and shaping the type of improvements that we're trying to present in that, or framing it in that way, is really important and is really useful. And we have a lot to learn from our friends in the lean business in particular around just how we can frame improvement, even if it's just around simple improvements, into the money game. So, I would suggest that we should be very careful not to be afraid of that, but be creative in the way that we frame the health and well-being, in particular, changes that we might introduce into the workplace. I mean, go back to that 1562 figure around family and staff well-being in the workplace. How not focusing on that, companies that don't focus on that, tend to have productivity deficits to that tune per employee. That's not massively scientific, but it's representative of the types of figures that we might be able to use in order to convince people to release a different focus for what we're doing when it comes to, proposing some of the health and well-being programs that are going to keep people at work, keep people productive, keep people healthy, and people contributing to the well-being, the sustainability, the profitability of the business.
Okay. Trish has raised, thanks there. Trish has raised the question, how would you include driver teams in communication about health and safety in a logistics company
Yeah.
using multinational, culturally diverse team members?
Okay. So, multinational, culturally diverse team members. Number one, we have focused a lot in our message. Traditionally, up to 10 years ago, it was all based on words. Okay. Uh, what we've available to us in in-house social media channels, uh, in ordinary just communication with people, using our Twitters and using our Snapchats and all of it, we're much better at communicating with people, using image, using clips, and using shorter, snappier, more focused things that we're looking at. So that's the first thing. We're getting better at that. We do it in our private life. There's no reason why we can't introduce that into our work life as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, while one of the difficulties with that kind of communication strategy is that, on the face of it, we may not be able to see what the reach is, okay, what the impact is. A lot of places are building in reach, measurable types of indices. So, for example, in the construction industry in this country, over the last couple of years. We've had a UK charity coming in to present a program around mental health in construction sites, and in particular on suicide prevention. One of the measures that they use in order to establish how effective they've been is not how many people have attended their programs, but how much those who have attended have passed on the links that have been generated in their programs to other staff members, and how they have linked into the program. Okay, so we have to be really creative when we're talking about using social media. We have to be using lots more images, lots more moving pictures. At the very least, that's when it's going, I suppose, just internal communication going one way. There are, however, some programs that are starting to emerge that allow better in-house social media type of programs. I mentioned to George there recently the U Factors platform and what that's doing in order to support people behave better, nudge themselves better towards more effective ways of doing things. That's certainly an example of how you use that kind of media for people who are dispersed right around the world, right around the country, who we mightn't see from one end of the year to the other, let's face it.
Yeah, the other thing, Trish, from my experience, I've recently just completed an assignment in the US with a logistics company. The first challenge I had as a consultant with the company is when it came to driver safety and compliance with Department of Transport regulations in the US, where they're meant to check their tire depth, they have to do various safety checks. Management really was the blockage, the first blockage that I encountered. They didn't want the auditors going anywhere near the drivers. The reasons for that, I never got to the bottom of, if I'm perfectly honest. Yeah. But that was one of the first issues. The second thing that I observed with them, Trish, is they had wonderful software, because one of the problems I said, look, it's a DOT regulatory requirement. There's no way out of this. You can't just not do it. And they had software, Trish, and what the drivers were recording is that this check was done. Yeah. And then I said, hold on a minute. It was so vague, I couldn't make any. What checks did they do? Did they check the tires? Did they check the wipers? What checks did they do? Oh, we can't be getting the drivers to do that check. It'll stop them from delivering the loads and from picking up the loads. That was the second thing. And I said, look, you don't have a choice here. Yeah. You're going to fail the ISO audit. Yeah. Let alone if you have a DOT inspection in the morning, you're in trouble. You've spent all this money. And what I found was they never trained the drivers on how to use the software. But the software was costing them a nice amount of money. Yeah. So I got them to introduce it, and the drivers were using it, because they were mainly Ukrainian, Russian in this particular company, just to give you the background. Yeah. And because the language was another issue, because it said the US auditors, they only understand English. They're never going to be able to communicate. So why are you wasting our time? That was kind of the attitude. Yeah. But I had to break down those barriers. Yeah. And we did break down those barriers. Yeah. So there's similar requirements for logistics companies. It's not just in the US. But as Willie would say, it's getting the basics and the simple things right. And what was, from my point of view as a consultant, what was criminal in this case is they'd invested in the software and no one was using it. And the software then had all wonderful data analytics, yeah, in place that could do with it. But with logistics companies, I understand on-time delivery is a massive issue. Yeah, This logistics company, Trish, was also collecting in Canada. It had higher competency requirements because the drivers were crossing the border into Canada and then back into the US. And then you know the havoc that's caused when there's an unplanned breakdown of a truck and they need servicing immediately. Yeah. They had very little data there. They had this platform, but they weren't using it. Yeah. So as Willie says, even with logistics companies, it's the simple basic things. And as ISO 45001 says, you have to consult and there has to be employee participation. And in a logistics company, don't take this the wrong way, the drivers are the king and the queen. Yeah. Logistics planning people are critical, operational people are critical, but it's the drivers and it's the driver behavior is the key indicator. Yeah. And drivers know more than anyone else their own safety, because in the US in particular, severe weather, and now we're into the winter, they're facing massive hazards weather-wise. Yeah.
Okay, I hope, Trish, that gives you some idea. If this is a particular challenge that you're interested in addressing, we'd be delighted to talk to you further about it. What I would say in relation to the health and well-being side of things is that when it comes to staff who are who are working remotely from a hub or any kind of a hub, yes, that's where you really got to think creatively. Around what measures you want to use and how you want to promote the business and how you want to promote good health among people. And of course, drivers in particular are an area where that's always going to be difficult to work on. But creative thinking, the right type of tools, the right type of data, and you can get good results.
Are there any other questions? I think that was...
Okay. Could I say, if that's where we're at and we're looking at just coming up to the hour at this stage, again, could I say thank you very much for the time that you spent with us. Please don't hesitate to come back to us with any specific questions. We are particularly interested in hearing what you have to say about health and well-being measurement and programs around that area. I think that over the next 6 months in particular, we're going to be looking at that area in a lot more detail, and we're looking forward to working with you around it.
Okay, on behalf of the Kelmac Group, then to our clients and to my team, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will basically, within the next 24 hours, we'll post the webinar up on our website and you'll be able to access it if you found it particularly useful. Yeah. So thanks and have a lovely evening. Yeah. Thanks for your participation.